Hey,
Hey, what's going
what's up,
on?
Matt? Good to see you,
Not
brother.
much. Yeah, good to see you too. To everyone tuning in today, hope you guys are doing well. We take questions every week just from our community members about all things worship leading, tracks, just some of the most popular topics here at Loop Community. And today we got Mr. Matt McCoy. He's going to jump on and help us answer a few of these questions. So if any of you guys watching have things you'd like to see answered, go ahead and put them in the chat or in the comments section wherever you're viewing this, and we can always kind of circle back to those and see what we can get answered. Matt, so thanks for doing this, and yeah, we've got a few questions to get to if you're ready.
Yeah, man. Let's do it. What do we got?
Awesome. First question we have says, does using an audio interface improve the sound quality of the tracks coming from Prime as opposed to using the headphone jack?
Improving the sound quality. So technically, yes, there is an improvement because you're going out through USB, and so it's not just like an analog signal, which is the headphone jack. So technically, it is higher quality. The track rig is high quality, line level, so very loud signal. But I don't think it is enough for most people to know the difference. So I think, and I say that not to bash the track rig at all, but I
Mm,
guess what I'm saying is that you don't have to. One of the reasons people don't use tracks is they feel like they have to get really complicated and complex with this stuff.
mm,
And if really you don't have a budget in your church and all you can afford is just doing the headphone jack out of your iPad, don't worry about that. Like, that's not a big deal. The headphone jack on your iPad, if your iPad has one or your Mac has one, works great, and you can totally accomplish what you want to accomplish with using the headphone jack. So I would say, yeah, the quality is less, but it's not noticeable enough to matter.
yeah, awesome, awesome. Question number two says, how much should I actually be doing with the tracks during the service?
During the service, worship leaders are so tempted all the time to kind of be noodling around and playing with the tracks. And I would say you need to really think about how you're using tracks and how it's going to be impacting your worship leading. Because what you don't want to have happen is where your worship leading suffers because you're so concentrated on your computer and what Ableton Live is doing or what Prime's doing or your foot controllers. You really want to be able to just focus on leading worship. And so it really comes down to what type of leader you are. You know, there are churches that are doing completely spontaneous worship and they're trying to jump around from all different sections, jump from the chorus to the bridge to the verse and like back again. And that's fine. I would say if that's you, don't do that as the worship leader. Have somebody in your band, like a band director or a music director, be the person who's making those calls
Mm,
because you don't want to be leading worship and like jumping all around the prime song arrangement. So have a music director take care of that if that's what your church usually does. Otherwise, I think as a worship leader, the most you should really be doing is maybe having a button on a Looptimus controller like this, that when you press just this button, it just repeats the current section you're in.
mm,
I think that's enough where it's not taking too much brain power, but it gives you that control over, like, we're in this chorus. I want to do this chorus again. So
yeah,
you press this button and it repeats the chorus. Very simple. And that's really mostly what I think happens in worship. You're in a bridge, you're in a chorus, and you're like,
right.
let's just repeat this again. It's pretty rare, I think, that people are actually jumping like all the way through to a different
Yeah,
section of the song. Usually it's just a repeat. So I don't know. Be careful not to do too much. Don't do more than you need to. And if it's going to be a ton of stuff, have a music director and someone else in your band do it.
yeah, awesome. Question number three, what tools should I equip my team with so that they are prepared for rehearsal and Sunday morning?
It's a good question. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Matt. Because I know that you play in a worship band, and I would be curious from your
Yes.
perspective what you wish your leader would give you as
Yep.
tools. My first thought would be, I think, so I'm all about memorizing charts and sheet music. I'm all about that because I think that when you're actually leading worship, when you're playing worship music, if you have the song memorized and you're not staring at a chart the entire song, it really frees you up. It frees you up to just enjoy leading worship and enjoy worshiping instead of reading a chord chart. So I'm
Mm.
all about people memorizing, but for rehearsals and for sound check, I think having a chart helps a lot. Um, so I would say make sure you show up with charts printed if you're doing printed charts. So I know some churches do like iPad charts, but have the charts already printed, ready to go on the stands when the band walks in. I can't tell you the number of times I've walked in where like last minute the worship leader's printing the charts in the back room and running out, and it's just kind of chaotic. Have the charts ready to go, and then let them use them during the rehearsal, during the sound check. And then what I try to do is then just take the charts away for the real thing, and encourage your team to really memorize. So that for
Mm.
sure is one tool I think is a huge thing to help your band be prepared. What do you think, Matt?
Well, gosh, there's a lot of things. I think at the very, very minimum, you at least need to have the songs picked out more than a week advance. Sounds
Yeah,
pretty sounds pretty elementary, I guess,
basic.
but
Yeah,
you'd be surprised how many times, we even get to a rehearsal, even before service because we wouldn't do midweek rehearsals.
yeah,
But we'd go up there, and you're making last minute changes, adding new songs. And fortunately, I was on a team where we could handle those types of things. But
yeah,
there would be instances where we have musicians that maybe aren't used to that, and things tend to kind of start to unravel when you make last minute changes and things like that. So it's like at the very least, if we at least got a text with the songs that we could even listen to, if we didn't even have the chance
yeah,
to rehearse them, if we could at least listen to the songs and have an understanding of kind of the service flow the week prior, then you're setting your guys up for success. Because I think generally, throughout a given week, people have times that they can set aside to, whether it's
yeah,
10 or
and,
15 minutes to, like, run through the tracks. If you at least
yeah,
give them an idea, then they can take
yeah.
a small look at it. And even something as small as that will make your rehearsal before a service just go that much more smoothly. So, it's a very
And make
little
sure the
thing, but if you can
keys,
do that, it's good.
yeah, and make sure the keys are set correctly.
Yeah.
Because what you don't want to do is have someone rehearse a song in the key of C all week, and then they show up and it's like, no, we're doing that in the key of B flat. And it's
Mhm.
like, it's not the end of the world, but just try to get the keys and everything all figured out ahead of time. The
Yeah.
more time you can give your team to prepare, the better.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah,
It's a great question.
that is a great question. Um, to move right along, we've got, if I have a full band, do I really need to use tracks and how can I do it well?
That's a good question. If you have a full band, do you need to use tracks? Hmm, maybe not, but it depends on what songs you're doing. So tracks are you never want to use tracks that you have a live instrument already playing. So if you have a bass player, you don't want to use the bass track.
Mm,
But if I had a full band, the tracks I would use would be just extra elements that help fill in that full band. So stuff I don't have, maybe shakers or a tambourine or an arpeggiator or a
mm,
synth lead line. If I don't have someone playing those parts on stage, then I would use a track for that.
yeah,
But people can go overkill with tracks. And I would just say keep them really simple, keep them stripped down. The tracks that I'm using all the time right now are enhancement tracks. Whenever I'm
yeah,
using a track from Loop Community, I'm using enhancement tracks, because enhancement tracks are all electronic elements that are meant to fill out the sound of a full band. So if you've got a full band, you can play along with an enhancement track, and these tracks are going to just kind of help fill in kind of any sort of missing space in the song. So I would say keep it really simple. Don't overuse tracks. Now, I think you could inverse that question and ask, if you don't have a band, should you use tracks?
yeah,
And I think you have to be even careful there. So I've been leading worship at a church plant recently. They don't have any band, just a keyboard player.
mm.
And I was very tempted last week to try using full tracks. Like I was going to use a master track with like drums, bass,
Oh,
electric,
wow.
everything. Because I thought, I wonder if anybody would really notice. And honestly, I kind of chickened out. I was going to do it. And
Mm,
I'm like, I don't know if this might feel really awkward. I think most people maybe wouldn't know or maybe wouldn't care.
mm,
I didn't try it, so I'm not sure. And I would be curious if anybody has tried that. Type in the comments right now what your experience was, because I would love to know. Have you ever led worship just from acoustic guitar with a full multi-track band behind you? Have you ever
Yeah.
done that, Matt?
I don't know that I have ever been in a position, um, where I've done that. I think in most cases you can get away with that. Maybe the drums is the only thing that
It would feel weird,
we
wouldn't
we
it?
would re we would resort to, taking out. Um,
In
but
your
yeah, I can't
in-ears, it
say it.
might feel really good, but in the
Yeah,
in the crowd, like in the congregation, it might feel kind of awkward.
right, right.
So
Yeah,
what I
so I
ended up
can't.
doing was I took the tracks and I muted the drums, I muted the bass, electric
Okay.
guitars. Actually, I left in a little bit of electric lead,
Mm,
not rhythm, because I don't want like a rhythm guitar going the whole time, but there
yeah,
were some lead parts that were kind of cool.
okay.
And then I left in like pad, piano, and then percussion.
Yeah,
And that felt totally fine. And it was just me
right.
on an acoustic guitar along with that stuff. And I
Yeah,
asked the pastor afterwards, I'm like, how did that feel? And he thought it felt great.
yeah,
He doesn't technically know what we're doing.
yeah.
Um, but he just knows like how it like felt and how it sounded.
Mm,
And so to him, he was like, that was great. Which I think, by the way, is also a really good tip is that worship leaders, you need to be communicating and talking to your pastor
mm,
and getting feedback. Get feedback from people in the congregation. Like, hey, you know, how did the fullness of the sound, how was that? Or how were the drums too much? Or you need to be getting feedback because when you're up on stage wearing in-ears, you're in a totally different world in a way. Like what you're hearing is very, very different than what people
yeah,
in the congregation are hearing. And so I think you need to really be getting feedback and asking for it. Sometimes people won't give it unless you ask.
mm.
Although some worship leaders are sitting here thinking, there's that one person in your church who always gives the feedback without asking, without you asking. And they're the
Oh,
ones
yeah.
saying, like, it's too loud. I remember leading worship at a church, Matt, where like this lady, she always complained about how loud the drums were and how loud the sound was. And so literally during worship, she would just stand there and protest like this the whole time. I would look out and I would just see
Oh,
her and
wow.
she'd be like this, just staring at me,
Oh, no.
just to say, like, you know how I feel
Turn it
about
down.
this.
Yep. Oh my goodness.
I
Wow.
went off on a tangent there, Matt, but
Hey, that's okay.
do you have
I
any
think
thoughts you want
everyone's
to share
been
about
there.
that?
Oh, man. Well, I think as far as tracks go, I mean, we always say, less is more, and I think even if you are a small band, I think you can get away with pretty much using most elements outside of, like, the craziest of, your drum track and all that stuff.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, I can think of many, many services, and me, even as, like, a musician who maybe knows, kind of what's going on. Oh, yeah, there's a lot of times stuff in
yeah,
the tracks going on that you're like, "Oh, like, they're probably using tracks," but it's not at all a distracting thing. It's so beneficial just to have all those different elements. So the enhancement tracks, I think, are a great place to be if you do have a full band. Definitely consider the enhancement tracks.
yeah,
Even if not, even if you're using the other tracks, I mean, still great things. There's a happy medium, I think, regardless of how big or small your band is, or if you have no band. So
yeah.
yeah,
You
it's a
know,
great question.
it's why I really love it's the whole idea of tracks have changed so much over the years. Like in the
Mm,
past, maybe 5 years, maybe more, 6, 7 years, what got really popular were like the original master tracks, where
mm,
they're like tracks that are the instruments from the album, like bass, drums, like
yeah,
very like real recorded instruments. And I personally really miss the days, and some of the young kids out there won't remember this, but when people were first using tracks in worship, it wasn't that at all. It was
mm,
all electronic elements, all of it. None of it was like real um, studio tracks.
yeah,
It was all just electronic elements to help fill out the sound of what you're already doing instead of replacing. And that's why I really want to get us back to that because I think
yeah,
that is where it's at. Because what's funny now is if I use a master track, I mute 90% of the tracks.
yeah.
And so what's the use of like I get a master track, I mute 90% of them.
Mhm.
And because I don't need them because I have someone in my band to play them. And if
Yeah,
I don't have somebody to play them, it's kind of awkward to use all of them, like we were just
yeah,
talking about. So that's why I'm using enhancement tracks a lot. Community tracks are also like that. If you find community tracks on our website, you'll see that like a lot of those, especially the early ones, are all kind of electronic feeling, creative takes on a song. And I just love those. And that's the heart of Loop community for sure, are those community tracks. So
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing too is, when you're using, community tracks, enhancement tracks, like there's still such an opportunity for your worship ministry to leave, a unique, imprint on that song. It fills
yeah,
out all the space, but like if you've got this super talented team, there still is as much room for them and their like, their creative, their artistic influence to shine through, which I think is
yeah,
the other cool thing, as opposed to like the master tracks where you've got the leads and all that stuff already
yeah.
baked in. Cool, cool. Well, the last and final question we have says, I recently got moved from just being a guitar player to actually leading the worship set. Do you have any tips for being more confident on stage?
Hmm. Practice a lot. You need to make sure that when you get up there, you really know what you're doing. Like you're not learning it on the fly in the moment in front of 300 people. So make sure that you've practiced, you know the song, you know the lyrics, you know the chord progression. Because once you kind of have that burned into your memory, and that's another reason why I like memorizing chord charts, is because once
Yeah.
that's kind of burned in you, that gives you another thing that you don't have to think about.
Mm,
A lot of times people lose confidence on stage because they start panicking, thinking like, what are the lyrics that are coming up next? What are the chords? What's the arrangement of the song? What's next in the set list? What am I going to
mm,
say? All of those things you need to have pre-planned and pre-practiced. Even I think if you're going to be saying something like reading
yeah.
a scripture or having a verbal moment, you should practice that
Mm,
many times. Um, I do that for sure. I actually will take a note out on my phone and write down what I'm going to say, and
yeah.
then just backstage, I'll just like practice it a couple times because then you're not actually just like doing it on the fly, and
Yeah.
that's where people start to get really nervous and lose confidence. So just be prepared, and then just know that just the more you do it, the more comfortable you're going to feel. Kind of like riding a bike. The more you lead, the more you have practice doing it, the more comfortable you're going to feel up there doing it.
Mm,
Another thing that is really helpful is to co-lead with others who are better and more seasoned leaders than you are. So, anytime you can co-lead with another worship leader, that's a huge opportunity to be able to also learn from them, but it also takes a little bit of the weight off of your shoulders, especially if you're brand new to it. Kind of just like do it together with them, watch, learn, and then eventually you'll be able to kind of take it all on your own and feel completely comfortable.
mm,
What do you
mm.
think, Matt?
Yeah, I think that's huge. I think you have kind of a unique opportunity to have already served in that ministry if you have moved from someone, just a member of the band to then step into like the leadership. You've already been blessed with the opportunity to get to know your church, your church body and family. You've already in a way kind of have a unique relationship with them. You're a familiar face. So it's like, in a way, there's not as much pressure. You can go up there and be yourself and be confident in the relationship that you already have and trust that the Lord's just going to continue to equip you in that time. So I would say kind of lean into that. Don't imagine that you're having these massive shoes to fill. Just
Yeah,
trust that, like, hey, the Lord's brought you there for a reason. And if your heart has been, um, to selflessly serve and just benefit your community in that way, that's something that your church will respond positively to. So I don't know. I would just say, yeah, don't take yourself too seriously. Mistakes are going to
yeah,
happen. And it's like we've talked about this before. All these like worship fails clips and stuff can seem really bad, but it happens to even the best of the best of us and most talented of worship leaders. And it's like what makes a worship leader, I mean, so relatable are things like that. So it's like almost lean into that aspect of like worship leading. It's not going to be perfect, but that'll just help you build more of a connection and then lead people more intimately into the presence of God. So
totally. You have to take the pressure off yourself. And it's not perfection that God's looking for, you know? You just need to bring everything you've got in excellence, just
mm,
do the best you can.
yeah,
And come authentically, and that is what's gonna shine through. So it's not focusing on the performance aspect or like being perfect. It's just be who you are. And I think too, people really respond to that as far as when they're being led. Um, I think people want to see that they're being led by a real human being who's just like
Yeah,
them. And it's not like it's a rock star or something I'm on stage that's perfect, but just someone who loves the Lord and loves to worship and is just giving it their all. And I think that is what really matters.
yeah. Well said. I love
So,
it.
Matt, I think we have a couple live questions. We've
Cool.
got one from about the Looptimus Mini. If you want to pull that
Okay.
up, Jonathan. So Charles Finney says, "Hey guys, love you guys. What you provide. I've been using Prime for the last 2 years. Whoop! Awesome. Thanks, man. Are you coming out with the wireless Looptimus Mini soon? This one. Look at this. It's wireless. No, this
Not
is
quite.
the Looptimus Mini wireless. I would actually love to make this wireless. And so, as far as soon, no, because we haven't even started. But that's definitely something on the radar. Eventually, we want to do because
Yeah,
everything's going wireless anyway, and I think this would be a killer controller wireless. But
yeah.
as far as answering your question specifically, no, it's not coming soon because we haven't even started it. Do we
Awesome.
have any other questions? I'm not sure.
Let's take a look. I'm not sure. I'm not seeing anything on my end, so I think that might be it for now. But yeah, if any of you guys have things you'd like to see us address on here, feel free to message those to us at Loop Community. However it is you interact on social media, and we can always get to them next time. But Matt, I
Yeah, so
appreciate.
we get
Oh,
we get a lot of good questions that come in through like our support or social media.
yeah,
That the hope and the desire of this segment that we do is to first of all answer questions that the community has, but answer very practical questions of about using tracks or about leading a team, rehearsals, that type of stuff, and very practical training. And
yeah.
so, if anybody has questions, like Matt was saying, just email them to us, shoot us a message, a DM. We want to hear from you. And Matt, I appreciate it, man. Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, not a problem. Thanks to you. We'll see you, and yeah, enjoy the rest of your
Yep.
day.
See you next
We'll
week.
talk soon.
Bye.
Bye.